If there's one yardstick by which most billionaires measure their success, it's their fleet of staff.
Valets, butlers, people who could look after your wine cellar. It's as if they don't trust themselves to do it.
And the prickly demands the super-rich sometimes place on their staff are becoming ever more bizarre.
We had the lady who wanted 200-300 candles lit every night before she arrived, like a sea of candles as she came in.
You're asked to find and source first edition books signed by the authors from hundreds of years ago.
One of our Saudi clients came to us asking for butlers for meerkat babies.
So I think it's all pretty bonkers.
That's right. She said butlers for a meerkat, sourced by a mere mortal. But cross your loyal staff at your peril, for with great servitude comes great power.
Staff, once they've been with you for a long time, know where all the secrets are buried.
And no amount of injunctions will ever truly shut them up.
And if you can't trust some of your staff with your secrets, can you trust them with your priceless possessions?
The bottom line is I have to put florals in this vase. You just told me it's £500,000. Whew.
The mega wealthy outsource everything, including their children's future.
The child was 2 years old, and they were in a complete crisis about what nursery school he should go to so he could eventually get to Harvard.
It's a world where any and every whim can be gratified by the click of a finger.
There's only one moment of that day when the billionaire's not being attended by somebody else, and that's when he's in the John.
And if they don't want to see it all go down the pan, the super rich require super staff. This is the world of the billionaire, a land where too much is quite often not enough.
I'm a millionaire, but I ain't moving in the right direction.
To be merely big is banal to the super rich. Currently, the average billionaire is worth £1.79 billion, has 350 million sitting pretty in cash, and 4 luxury mansions worldwide averaging £14 million apiece. That's a lot of dusting.
Mama, I'm a millionaire, but I feel...
And there's problem number 1 for the ultra-wealthy. To maintain these palatial pads requires a small army.
The super rich have an inexhaustible appetite for staff.
If you're very wealthy and you have 5 or 6 houses, it's like a company. There's the top person, which is usually like a house manager for all the houses. Then under him, there's a manager for each house, and then it goes down like that.
That would include the chefs, the housekeepers, the drivers, any ground staff, any serving staff, pretty much everybody who would be involved in the smooth running of the home would be under that house manager's watchful eye.
And in America, they say for every 5,000 square feet of home you have to have one live-in person to take care of it. So if you've got, a 30,000 square foot home, you've got 6 people, theoretically, living in your home, cleaning it and maintaining it and all those things. I think the downsides to having a mega mansion is, they're substantial.
I remember sitting by a pool in some estate in Oxfordshire, and this billionaire was on his BlackBerry the whole time, ordering canapes to be made by the cook, to be brought by the butler to us by the pool. And actually, it just creates work for them in the end.
It takes a great deal of effort, actually, to run all these houses and run these families. These people actually effectively run their houses like people run their businesses.
Well, the recent trend is that you have to have an assistant for an assistant. So the housekeeper needs a personal PA.
So if you think about the super rich having to manage all the staff to maintain the staff, they're actually creating a sort of living nightmare of stress for themselves without really knowing it. And for what?
With servants snowballing out of control, the financial titans of London are having to turn to fixers like Sarah Vestin Rahmani, director of a luxury recruitment agency.
Hello, the Bespoke Bureau. Lucy speaking. How can I help?
The ultra high net worth individuals are looking for special touches in everything they do. So they come to us with all sorts of weird and wonderful requests. Right now, I have one client. This particular super rich client is looking for an action butler. So it's somebody who will accompany him to rock climbing, adventurous sports like skydiving and extreme skiing off-piste. But he also wants to take him raving because he likes electro music.
If your billionaire friends don't share your hobbies, don't worry. You can always hire someone who does.
One of our clients, she was a Middle Eastern principal, and she wanted to have a butler, a confidant, who was a yoga instructor, could bake and do flower arranging. So, you know, at that instance, I'm going into the database and I find the female butlers and I say, do you do yoga?
Yoga might be stretching things, but at least it's not, well, plain bonkers.
We had a little bit of a challenge once when a very elderly lady in the Midlands rang in to say she wanted a butler who played the bagpipes. So the butler had to walk away from the house for half an hour in the morning from 7:30 till 8, and then at 8 o'clock he would play the bagpipes, walking slowly back to be under her bedroom window at 8:30, which would be her alarm clock, which is actually what I think happens to the Queen.
And at Sarah's agency, the super rich frequently demand that all their family are treated like royalty.
So we have an Arabic client who has just recently moved to London, and he has left his wives, plural, behind him, and has a new wife, a very beautiful and young Russian lady. But they have a chocolate Labrador who they have bought an apartment for. So he has his own pad. This dog has better house property than I do. And the dog needs a nanny. His apartment's incredible, and we did a site visit, and beautiful flat screen TVs for the dog to watch during the day, and yeah, amazing river views, and that's the life of the clients we deal with at the moment.
If the pampered pooches of the uber-rich can expect riverside pads, what are the billionaires expected to fork out for their staff?
Most important thing in the whole world is staff these days. The hardest thing to get, and you've got to look after them. Quite right, too.
The senior level private staff, house estate managers, butlers, personal assistants, for instance, it's not uncommon for them to be, their salaries to go into the six figures, 100,000 up to 200,000. So they can get treated very well.
Don't ever underestimate staff quarters. That's seriously important. A friend of mine who lives in Eaton Square, he constantly gets letters, and the gist of the letter is, we're looking for somewhere to house our driver and our caretaker, and would you be prepared to sell the flat for our staff? This is quite extraordinary. These are flats worth 20 million, 15 million pounds, and they're being bought purely to house staff.
And one reason staff are treated so well is because the super rich are terrified that at any time the chef will spill the beans.
The greatest source of fear amongst the rich is their staff. And they are paranoid, and they have every reason to be paranoid.
Trust is hugely important. Staff, once they've been with you for a long time, know where all the secrets are buried.
They are privy to everything, and no amount of injunctions or disclaimers will ever truly shut them up. So what do? They pay them more, and they pay them more.
I don't understand why there aren't more secret diaries of the butler type books published, because my goodness, they've got such stories to tell.
But every now and then, a billionaire does get burnt. Here are our top 3 exposés. At number 3 is a real page-turner. Multi-millionaire art collector Charles Saatchi was left red-faced when his PA claimed he paid her to buy numerous copies of his book in a bid to make the bestseller list. At number 2, Lady Gaga can't contain her poker face, furious at revelations by her former assistant that she was requested to share the same bed because the pop star hated sleeping alone. And at number 1, the Queen is not amused after an undercover reporter posed as a royal footman and revealed that breakfast in the palace is like that in a caravan, with the royal cornflakes served from Tupperware containers. when you're super rich, it can really pay to vet your staff. Coming up, the pressure is on for billionaire children to make the grade.
And when I said to the mother, look, realistically, Oxford and Cambridge are beyond his compass, she looks at me and goes, do they not take any account of breeding anymore?
In school, being top of the rich list doesn't necessarily put you top of the class.
My student didn't know what the words DIY stood for. And she was mortified to find out that it stands for do it yourself. And she was like, oh.
In the billionaire's world, cash buys kudos. On the outside, every aspect of their life screams status and success. But often on the inside, there's a nagging awareness that the greater your wealth, the more you have to lose, and that the family legacy will one day rest on your darling little children.
Their children are a reflection of themselves, and if their children aren't successful, then it somehow must mean that they're not successful.
I have sat in a room with somebody who has got a personal worth well over £100 million, who is in tears because they worry about their child's future.
I think that it's putting way too much pressure on young children.
They're like, we really need the very best tutor who can help proofread this dissertation, because if I don't get a first, you know, I might not be able to get the job here or there, or no one in my family business is going to take me seriously.
Failure is not an option. You have to be a galactic, super achiever.
The super rich, their worst nightmare is that their child simply lives off their achievements for the duration of their lives.
The children are another way they can demonstrate their superiority to the rest of us. Everything has to be bigger, better, more successful.
And the first measure of success for many children of the mega wealthy is to secure a place in the higher echelons of learning. And to do this, from the moment little Serge and Beatrix can walk, they must work.
The super rich outsource everything that normal parents do themselves, which extends to their children. So the children are overscheduled and tutored.
They want their children to really get ahead of the game. They hire a night nanny, a day nanny, then they will also get the tutors. So, for example, the Mandarin tutor being a typical one, because people want their children to learn Mandarin so that they're going to be ahead of the game in the Chinese market in the next 20, 30 years.
I was at a smart lunch in Oxfordshire, and suddenly a car drove up at 2 o'clock on the button. The children were taken away from the table to do Latin with the tutor that Roman Abramovich had used. So they didn't even get pudding. And they had to go off and sit in a dark dining room and do, Latin conjugations.
The best story I heard was of a parent in Hampstead summoning one of the heads of these tutorial agencies, on a Sunday night, urgent, and he assumed that they were sitting the exam the next day, and he arrived, and the child was 2 years old. And they were in a complete crisis about what nursery school he should go to so he could eventually get to Harvard. That's how absurd this is.
The super rich desperately hope that tutoring their spawn from first steps to kindergarten will secure that cherished place at Harvard or Cambridge.
In the old days, in the 50s and 60s and maybe the 70s, if you were wealthy enough, if you made a nice chunky donation to the school or the college or the university, you could buy your way in, so it didn't really matter. But now that era is gone.
So the rich are having to fight harder and harder to maintain this privilege, which many of them think is their God-given right.
This extreme pressure has led to the rise of the super tutor, a modern-day superhero who swoops in to pour Pythagoras into the privileged.
A super tutor is someone that has a proven track record of taking a student who is struggling. For example, I had a student who was sat on 3 U's, and in 5 weeks I got them from 3 U's to 3 C's. Now, I'm quite proud of that, because that was nothing short of a miracle.
And such is the demand for the super tutor that it's become astonishingly big business. In the UK alone, private tutoring is now a £6 billion a year industry, with desperate parents offering huge wads of folding incentive.
It can get very expensive. In some circumstances, there's, bidding wars for the very best tutors.
There are a tiny, tiny minority of super tutors who earn enough whereby they can only work for the super rich, and they will charge £200, £300, £400 an hour.
They're like, no, I like this tutor, I want this tutor. We're like, she's full, you can't have this tutor. And then they come back to us and say, listen, I'll pay double the rate.
Some people have been given watches, pens with their names engraved in. Female tutors have had handbags, sort of Uber handbags, all that kind of thing.
Sometimes people are paying really top dollar for their tutor.
In the world of the super tutor, classrooms are swapped for country retreats, philosophy is taught on private jets, and mathematics, well, that's all at sea. 27-year-old super tutor Phineas Pett has just returned from teaching 2 young children on a private yacht in the French Riviera.
Parents would often go off, they'd go to restaurants or go shopping, and whilst I was teaching the children for 8 hours a day, they had one friend over for half an hour on the whole of the 7 weeks. They sort of had a play and stuff like that, and then sort of the parents wrapped it up and had to go back to lessons.
And in many cases, the young heirs of the super rich come pre-programmed with an eccentric knowledge base of their own.
The oldest one said to me, Finn, at school, none of my friends know Louis Vuitton or Hermes or Chanel. They've never heard of any of these brands. And I said, well, it's because they're normal children, they're 11. He was like, I know, but it's just really weird. My children were obsessed by Abramovich. We even did a sort of slow sail by Eclipse, which is his huge yacht. Kind of bizarre, because I remember sort of saying, oh, hang on, are we going back into port? So, oh, no, we're just going to have a look around just in case there's any other boats that we know, or actually maybe the ones that we like the look of and we might buy in the future. I was like, right, thank you, 11-year-old, for telling me that.
Another super tutor boarding the brain train is Cambridge Classics graduate Tara Crabb. She's been lured to New York by an offer she simply couldn't resist.
So my tutoring job came through a week ago. I guess you would classify him as super rich because his parents are setting me up with an apartment in Manhattan, which is very close to where he is, covering my expenses to fly home whenever I need to, and putting me on a salary which is really competitive. It's as much as I would be earning for my age in the city a year, and that's just for tutoring for 2 hours a day. The last time I had an offer like this, it was to be based in Pakistan. It was in the region of the tens of thousands to spend a few weeks in Pakistan. The pay was wonderful, but they said that they would also be supplying bulletproof cars. And obviously I turned it down.
Desperate to secure their riches and the family name, many billionaires are also not averse to shoving their little ones' size 3s through every possible door.
So in the summers, they go to museums, they go to plays, they go to football games, but when they go to football games, they go behind the scenes and they meet the football players. They go to the World Cup. So when they are interviewed for their public school 2 months later, and they say, well, how did you spend the summer? Out comes these wonderful stories of how I looked at the Klimt exhibit. And it reminded me of my recent visit to Vienna.
But worryingly often, even the riches of Croesus sometimes prove futile in furnishing little Evgeny with any grip of the classics.
I've often had children who will write an essay about caviar or endless holidays in Monte Carlo or yachts. Imagine if you're a GCSE examiner and the last thing you wanted to read about is some annoying child who's literally spelling the word privileged all over their paper.
I think the worst thing that's ever been said to me is I was called a peasant. I mean, I wasn't really sure what to say to that. He was determined that I was a peasant because I earned less than his family.
I did have this one girl who was at dissertation level, and we had this session, and she just turned to me and went, what, so you mean you're not actually going to write it for me? She was adamant that we'd been building up to this stage so that I could write it for her. And I mean, obviously there are tutors that do that.
And that's what the rich truly believe, that somehow they can always get around the rules. And to a certain extent, I think it is true that they do, but there are times in which your child just isn't smart enough. And then they have to live with that.
Coming up, to the billionaire, it's not just their treasured children who are closely guarded, but their actual treasures too. They must risk it all by putting their prized possessions in the hands of their staff.
The bottom line is I have to put florals in this vase. You just told me it's £500,000. Whew.
For the everyday, run-of-the-mill billionaire, the battle to keep up with the Abramoviches is fought on an epic scale. The number of domestic staff is seen as a barometer of success, and it's spiraling out of control. According to the International Guild of Professional Butlers, in the 1980s there were around 100 butlers employed in Britain. Today, there are over 10,000. They're calling this the Downton effect, with a new moneyed elite desperate to live like their well-heeled predecessors.
I edited The Lady, and the classified ads were a real eye-opener because you realised that the upstairs-downstairs world was not just alive and kicking, it was thriving. There were still ads saying things like, "The Duchess of Bedford seeks lady's maid," as if it was Downton Abbey.
We're living in a financial golden age, which in many ways has comparisons with the great Edwardian Victorian age. One of the biggest trends is the extraordinary numbers of staff that people will have.
The demand that is out there for butlers, chefs, people who can come and polish your classic car collection, open the front door, all these things.
And that's simply what it is. If you have then bought a 10-bedroom stately pile, you are going to need people to help run it. It's an accessory to that lifestyle that you've chosen to live.
A lot of people buying, say, a 5,000-acre estate to do some shooting or something. That's quadrupled.
But this invasion of city boys playing weekend squires is breeding resentment in staff quarters.
There is old money, money that people have always had. So they're used to staff, they're used to their buildings, they're used to their palaces. They have a way of being that's gone through the generations and nothing changes.
There's a sort of resentment towards people who have made their own money. It's quite hard taking orders from someone who you feel is a self-made nouveau arriviste.
The nouveau riche will come for the weekend, and then they bring all their family with them and friends. They might have the full house for 3 days, non-stop, mad. People would arrive straight onto the shoots. It's amazing. They just don't stop drinking, don't stop shooting. It's quite crazy.
It's not just a home, but it is also a venue, visiting VIPs, celebrities, dignitaries, royalty. World leaders, indeed, yeah.
A private household is often run like a 5-star boutique hotel. It has the same standards that are required there in terms of, let's say, fresh flowers, fresh food, and top-range service. The standards are impeccable.
For those who demand the more fragrant side of frippery, candle artisan Rachel Vosper will create bespoke aromas for their homes.
We recently filled 3 Baccarat crystal bowls which had been flown over from New York by first class, and they were filled on our table in Belgravia and flown back by private jet. Their imagination goes wild, and you know, money is no object. If I'm fragrancing a 6-storey townhouse, we will very often have a different fragrance on each floor. So as you ascend through the house, you get a different sensory experience. 1 member of staff or 2 members of staff are very often employed to look after the candles in the house, which involves trimming the wicks every 4 hours and actually replacing the candles every 4 hours so they don't get too hot.
We had the lady who wanted 200-300 candles lit every night before she arrived. The driver would alert the staff, and then they'd have to light all of the candles from the drive right up into the house, right up into the bedrooms. Like a sea of candles as she came in. That's how she wanted it every night on arrival, and that's how it had to be.
What we consider as a luxury item, like good wine, beautiful florals in your house, they consider as a part of their everyday way of life. I had somebody who had a house, you know, out of the country, and we used to do weekly florals at, you know, upper several thousands of pounds, and they were never even at the house.
At all times, these ghost mansions must be primed like a hotel, ready for the billionaire to check in at a moment's notice. And that also applies to their dormant private jets and super yachts.
When I was on the private yacht, we'd spend time getting ready for the clients, the principal, to arrive and the family, and then they'd change their mind. So we'd spent a week polishing everything, and then they'd say, oh, they're not coming till Friday, or then they're not coming, and then they wouldn't come at all.
The The average billionaire spends £13 million on mega yachts for what is essentially a wondrous floating weekend caravan. And with hundreds of these remaining fully staffed but completely unused for months on end, the marina in Saint-Tropez has become one of the world's most glamorous caravan parks.
The easiest thing is to buy a yacht. The hardest thing is to run a yacht. So you need a good captain and you need good crew.
With 20 years as chief steward to the most perfectionist of seafarers, Terry Gilmore is ideally placed to train new recruits in the ways of billionaire service.
Okay, so what kind of world is this? 1 minute you could be cleaning toilets, the next minute you could be having cocktails in Capri. 1 minute you could do a very, very good job for the owner, and 1 minute you don't know what you've done wrong. The little details are all very important. If I go to Charlie, number one, he's got his sunglasses on. Number two, he hasn't shaven for a couple of days. That has to come off. And number three, we have to make his hair look correct to work on the interior of a yacht.
One of the larger super yachts that are out here nowadays, of about anything between 90 and 120 metres, they could have up to 50 crew, 50, 60 or 70 crew. It's like running a small hotel floating out in the oceans.
That's not acceptable. This has to go here. These have to go here. It's like going to the theatre. We have to act. We have to make the food look wonderful for them. The presentation's good. The plate looks good. The wine is served correctly. And the whole thing works like clockwork.
Sounds reasonable enough, so what could go wrong? Well, pack your trunks, because when needs must, the super rich occasionally have no qualms throwing their staff right in at the deep end. Literally.
One family, they were out at sea and Madame suddenly decided that she wanted to go for a swim. So one of the stewardesses spotted jellyfish in the water and she got one of the other stewardesses to jump in front of Madame. They got stung to bits, didn't complain, just to make sure that Madame could go for a lovely little swim.
And if you think Madame is asking a little much of her man Friday, well, up on the ski slopes, the uber-rich are taking their demands to whole new heights.
I heard a wonderful story of a billionaire skiing in North America, where the individual had returned home after a day skiing with his family and couldn't find the keys to his Range Rover and had dropped them in 7 foot of snow. He called the concierge company. The concierge company got a helicopter with an extended magnet like they do to pick up cars in scrap heaps, and flew that around the property until the keys flew up from out the snow with the metal keyring and hit the magnet. So that's kind of expecting the best and getting the service that you require.
It's obvious that billionaires are buying themselves unparalleled levels of service, staffed with grin and bear it ability. No task is too trying. Here are our top 3 outlandish staff jobs of the rich and shameless. At number 3, it's the extreme concierge service. Your wish is their command. Previous requests include securing dinner reservations for 2 on an iceberg, where at least the locals are already dressed as butlers. At number 2, it's Factor 50 Fonsworth Bentley, employed by rapper P. Diddy. His job? Sun technician. This chap's a high-end professional parasol holder. At number 1, and you won't find them on the comparison websites, it's your own personal insurance SWAT team. They like nothing more than to swoop in and sweep up the priceless art collections of the mega-rich in case of flood or fire. In the world of the billionaire, mansions are not just their occasional homes, but veritable treasure troves, bristling with gold and antiquity. And this creates a headache of its own, because every day the hyper-rich must risk it all by putting these precious artifacts in the twitching, nervous hands of their staff.
You're not working with kind of the everyday genre vases or containers or items. With the ultra-rich, now what you're dealing with is you're dealing with people who are antique collectors, art collectors, furniture collectors.
Their expectations